Hey everybody, how are you doing? How's your week been going? Welcome. I'm trying to figure out how we're going to do these wine tasting things and service with these things on. And I'm not sure at all that that's going to work. I brought a straw this week. I don't know if you guys want to try that this week and see if we can do anything, but really all I'm smelling is my own breath. And so I don't think, for the purposes of our blind tasting, that we'll maintain these. Hi Caitlin, welcome. Thanks for joining tonight. Who else is with us? Carrie's here. Awesome. Well, we're going to have a good fun night. We got a red in front of us. Already looking very intriguing. As I was sitting here, yeah, Stephen, we got a straw. You got to do what you got to do, right? I don't know if you can smell through the straw. No, we're going to just pass on that for now. We'll have to keep iterating and thinking about how we're going to venture into actual service and drinking wine while wearing masks in a restaurant. But we'll leave that for a conversation for a different day. I was just chatting with Julie before we started, and the excitement of being able to do this with you is now extra heightened because of the anticipation of what all of you are going to bring to the table and to the comments, the discussion, as we work to suss out what's in this glass or in this wine, which will be in our glass in a second. It's really neat to see how all of you have improved, frankly, and how my success in this is completely predicated on that improvement and how much you have all figured out more and more about these wines. I hope that one of the takeaways for you is that you've been actually learning how to enjoy and appreciate more of the wines. And so I'm excited to have all of you with us and very excited to go through this wine this evening. Great. Kristen's here, Rick's here, Robert's here, Susan, hi, welcome. We're super excited to have all of you with us. Shall we get started? Matt has a question before we get started. How far away should I hold a white piece of paper to judge? Let's see if I can get a piece of paper here to show you. It's not the paper per se, it's just the ability to see. So your ability to be over or between, so if you wanted to hold it up, you could do that and be looking at the glass through and against a white backdrop. The white backdrop just gives you a better sense of the color than, say, the color of my table or whatever table you're working on. So the white is just, like for me, I would probably just put it on the table and then the height you are above the table and the glass in between with the tilt to it, and you'll see it. We'll do that as we get to it. Let's pour ourselves a glass if you haven't already. And we'll jump right in. Hey, Melanie. Klaus, welcome, man. We're excited to have you back this week. And Max is here with Kathy. Cool. Erica and Drew. Good. I made the mistake of basically assuming it was just Erica the whole time, and Drew popped in last week and said he was also commenting. So, Drew, welcome. Appreciate your comments. The Shirleys are here to help. Yes, thank you, Chris. You've been acing a lot of these past couple of weeks. Anybody want to just mic drop it right off the bat? What is this? What the whole thing? Or should we go through the process? Let's go through the process. Jonathan's with us. Clancy's are a little late, no worries. We're here. Isabel, first time caller, long time listener. That's great. First time, you're not the first time tasting, I'm sure. So we'll get through that. Sean, no worries on that at all. We're just going to get started with a little bit of the first assessment. So for those of you that have joined us before, you know we've offered a tasting sheet that we have on the website, or you can pick one up from us as you come and pick up the wine. If you want to use that as a reference, if you're just joining us for the first time, then by all means, we will kind of work our way through a series of assessments. We're going to start with our appearance, then we're going to work our way into the nose, what it smells like, and then on the palate, and then we're going to kind of refine those general parameters and ideas that we come up with for this wine to figure out what the actual wines might be, and then try to narrow it further by putting some of those wines away by way of finally arriving at our final conclusion. Rick, you're doing this each week now, where you're telling us what you're eating, and we're not eating it with you, and it's making it all the harder. So you've got a hanger steak with grilled beans. Oh, that sounds delicious. Chris mic drop for sure. Swanbergs are here, good. Then we can definitely get going. And Jan's here, Bobby, good. And yes, facial hair. A little bit. I really haven't shaved since December. Well, I've shaved, but I haven't gotten rid of the beard since December. All right, let's do it. All right, what do you see? So I saw earlier someone noted that it was lighter in color, right? So as you're looking at the wine over the top of a white piece of paper, for example. And in case I have my sheet here, one of the things you can kind of determine is, can you read through the red wine, for example? And that helps you to understand whether or not it's clear or hazy, and whether or not it's what its intensity is. If it's really deep and intense, you're not going to be able to see through it. If it's medium in intensity, you might be able to see sort of the lines of words, but you're not necessarily going to be able to make out the words. And if it's pale, you could pretty much read right through it. And this is between pale and medium for me. And so, welcome, Robert and Tanya. Glad you got the tech working. Yeah, we've had pretty consistent trouble with it ourselves. So understand that that's one of the difficulties of doing it this way, but appreciate you being here. Chris and Carrie are with us tonight. Oh, that's awesome. That makes my day. Thank you so much for joining us. They're the fine proprietors of Slater Run Vineyards. If you haven't been, you need to go. They make wonderful wines and have a beautiful place to hang out, and they've just opened for some patio seating outside. Highly recommend you visit them. And Melanie's noting ruby to pink, watery rim, and if you're interested in a lengthy and illuminating discussion about rosé, Melanie's your person to talk to. Hi, Kenny, you're here too. Kenny will be entertaining people next week, I think you mentioned, at the Inn at Little Washington, as they open up service on the patio, or some kind of outdoor service thing too. So everybody's figuring out the next phases within phase 1, phase 2 kind of thing. So yep, we've got a little bit of a watery rim. Watery rim is something that indicates perhaps a higher alcohol, a given opportunity that is sort of a 13.5, 14 perhaps higher alcohol. So that's something to consider. Lighter color, pale ruby is what Isabel's pointing out. Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, we are in the definite pale category, I think pale to medium. The color being red, ruby, so purple kind of being at the far end, sort of oftentimes purple associated with a deeper color, and the varietals that give you that deep richness. The ruby being sort of lighter varieties, generally speaking. Tawny being something that might have some age on it. Matthew, for the watery rim, yeah, there's a potential for some alcohol that might come out with the watery rim. It's just an indicator that we can think about. How about that gumbo? Thank you, Chris. Yeah, that sold out this week, which was great. We appreciate all of that. David, hey man, how are you? David and I work together in southwestern Virginia at a wonderful place called Riverstead, and now he's running some restaurants down that way, I think. Congratulations to you, I think, on a new child coming on the way soon. Great to have you with us, David. Play along. We're going to guess what this wine is. So this wine is giving us a lighter variation, potential higher alcohol, which tells us, if we're thinking about that water rim giving us a higher alcohol, we're thinking about potentially a warmer climate overall. If it has a higher alcohol, it requires a little bit more warmth to get potentially more ripe in the grapes. That ripeness in the grapes will give you a potential for having a little bit higher alcohol. So this is a possibility, so we're putting that out there. So if we're thinking about a cool climate spot right off the bat and a warmer climate spot, we would probably consider warmer just by what we're seeing. But that's not necessarily something you run to judgment on. You're just kind of starting to create little pins on the map to think about jumping back through there. Yeah, David just responded to where he is in southwestern Virginia. He's at Cootie Brown's in Bristol. I have to make my way down there, man. All right, so what do you smell? First off, is it clean? Is there anything on the nose that would say, ugh, I don't want to drink this? And for me, no, I'm not getting anything necessarily faulted. Yep, Max, you're noting too from a visual perspective, the legs are moving down a little bit quicker. So they're sheeting, they're a little bit lighter. What are legs? If you swirl the wine, the remnants that are left at the top of the glass as the wine comes back down, what's coming down, the tears or legs, if they come kind of creating a long stream, that's why they're called a leg. They also look like tears as they form. The speed at which they come down and the relative viscosity would also give you an indication of sugar and potential ripeness in the fruit. Yep, Carrie's noting tobacco and cherries. Melanie's noting bubblegum and graphite. We've got cranberry and cherry. It's a clean wine for sure. I agree with you there, Melanie. Yes, these are great descriptors. And your descriptors have been getting better and better. I like that bubblegum a lot. Bubblegum sort of triggers one grape for me, indicating that it might be Gamay, and that would follow suit with the color. So I'm going to put that out there, and it would certainly fly with the red raspberries, red cherries, floral notes. Robert's got some chocolate on the nose. Cool. So fruit. We've got red fruit, And that's one way to think about this. If you're having a hard time going, I don't smell red raspberries, I don't smell cherries. Begin to parse out for yourself. Does it smell red? Does it smell black? And does it smell like black cherry and blackberry, or does it smell like red raspberries? And if it doesn't really smell like any of those things, don't worry. Like, that's not something you have to get or understand in order to appreciate the wine that's in the glass, nor is it something you necessarily have to nail in order to be able to guess what the actual wine is. But red fruit versus dark fruit starts to lead to certain varieties, right? So if we're talking about red fruit, we're probably not talking about Cabernet Sauvignon, for example, or Tannat, for example, Petit Verdot, although you get some of that sometimes. But this sort of bright red raspberry cherries, we're talking about usually things like Pinot Noir, Gamay, Nebbiolo, Sangiovese perhaps. So there's it's a series of things that this wine is indicating already in just the nose. We haven't tasted the wine, and we're already starting to formulate an idea about what this wine might be. Red licorice from Caitlin, yeah, absolutely, that's nice. There is sort of that bubblegum kind of candied quality, and that red licorice is a nice way to say there's some strawberry, there's some red cherry, but confectionery kind of quality to this wine on the nose. Jonathan's thrown out Sangiovese already, yep, but not necessarily where it's from. Stephen, hey man, cherry, pepper, leather, good. Those are great descriptors. So in the Gamay world, we would be talking about Beaujolais perhaps, but in that element of description, the cherry, the pepper, the leather, we might want to think about maybe going further south and thinking about Syrah from the northern part of the Rhone. If we're getting a little more of those earthy things, Cabernet Franc perhaps, we could go over to the Loire Valley, absolutely. So we're just starting to, we're not trying to figure it out yet. We're just starting to say, as I taste this wine fully, I'm going to start to figure out whether these places make sense. And if they do, they stay in the running. And if they don't, they get jettisoned. So, all right. So we talked a little bit about fruit, a little bit of the earthen flavors in the way of that pepper and some of that leather. Anything else earthy, anything minerally, anything like forest floor, mushroomy, bark, cedar. Cedar will head us toward wood. I'm not getting a ton of earthy elements, but I do get a little bit of kind of that sort of toothpick, a little bit of cedar. There's a little bit of a hint of spice in the background. Anybody else getting that? Yeah, Robert's saying he's got a little spice in the nose. Yeah, I'm getting a little bit. That's an indication of some oak aging. Robert's thrown out there old world, warm climate. Yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting way to think about it. Maybe a warm vintage from the old world. And then more and more producers in the old world are certainly starting to make their wines a little bit riper, and it's getting warmer out there. There's some wood and spice. Yeah, Jonathan, I agree. Cinnamon from Isabel, thank you. That's a good descriptor. All right, sweaty leather. Button mushrooms. Yeah, there's sort of like a rum cake element here. There's a soaked rum cake for me that kind of goes back to the original watery rim, the watery meniscus, that maybe there's a little bit of an alcoholic quality here. So let's try this and see what we think. Let's do taste first, and then we'll work our way into some flavors. But as we taste, is it dry? Does it have tannin? What's the acidity like? How long is the finish? All right, pretty dry. That bubblegum element, that sort of candied element is on the palate too, but it's also a little bit herbal. There's some tannins. Yeah, Kathy, how would you classify those? What do you think? Are they light? Are they medium? Are they pretty pronounced? It's dry with strong tannins, says Nicole. Yeah. Kate, yeah, cherry Jolly Rancher. I like that. Exactly. Pucker up and acid for days. 100%. I agree with all of that. So high acid grape, lighter body, potentially higher alcohol. Wow. All that cherry note, a little bit of that pepper, some leather, some structure to this for sure. This is lovely. Medium wood tannins. Melanie's noting, yeah. The wood tannins give you kind of, the wood tannins for me are not quite as mouth filling. They lay a little bit flatter on the palate. Mm-hmm. They don't kind of get everywhere and expand. Like if you ever use spray foam to kind of seal a hole in a crack in the roof or something like that, that comes out and it goes, mm-hmm. And grape tannins kind of go for me, whereas the wood tannins sort of sit a little bit more linear. I think there is some of both here. And it draws you in. Yeah, Jan, I agree with that. High tannins, high acid. Are we going into Italy? Isabel asks, and that's exactly where my thought is. I mean, we have to at least for sure consider Piedmont, Nebbiolo, maybe Dolcetto, maybe Barbera, something in that range. I think Sangiovese could be in this camp. We could look at Norello Mascalese, for example, from Sicily. Melanie's making an interesting point here of some carbonic maceration. Like she's tried a Malbec in the past that has some carbonic from southwestern France. Carbonic being sort of a tank, the grapes go in it, they're under CO2 gas, and they begin to kind of crack, this juice runs out onto the skins, and they begin to ferment, and you get a sort of a primary kind of quality. You get sort of that strawberry, that grape, or that bubblegummy quality that we've been talking about. So there's carbonic potentially in this. It could be an interesting wine that way. We got some chocolate and cherry notes, a bit of lemon on the finish with chocolate Twizzler, burnt cherry. Sangiovese's in the running for Chris. And we've learned from past tastings we always heed what Chris says. Yeah. All right. So we're putting in the camp still, I think, because of the carbonic, maybe a carbonic Malbec. We're putting in some Gamay into this thing because we talked about it earlier. Some Pinot Noir, Sangiovese, Nebbiolo. We're thinking about maybe Barbera Dolcetto, things in that realm. 2017 Merlot from Virginia is Rick's point. That's an interesting idea. I think, Virginia can do that with a warm vintage, high acid, some tannin. I don't think that's a bad call at all. And I think that prompts the question of, are we old world versus new world? Tanya thinks this might be Aglianico. That's a cool guess. That's a really cool idea. Generally speaking, from the Aglianico that I've tried, I'm getting more dark fruit, get more black fruit than red, but it could very well be that. Aglianico gives you a lot of acid and it gives you a bunch of tannin, so absolutely. Sean's getting pencil dipped in cherry. Sounds like a derelict child in school, just playing around with his pencil and his lunch cherries, not paying attention to what the teacher is saying. Nicole's saying no Virginia twang. I understand the twang comment. There's plenty of that to go around for sure, but there's some really lovely Virginia wines, especially as they gain ripeness. And in a vintage like 17 that Rick's pointing out, we might not have that twang. I don't think necessarily Tony and Julie would be picking a wine with the twang either. So we could probably assume that there might be some of that. Finish is much richer and earthier, Robert's pointing out. Yep. And so that might lead us away from the new world and lead us more toward the old world camp. And Rick's pointing out there's more sharp than Merlot for him. And I think I agree. I would probably get a little more plum and a tiny bit more black potential fruit. Sort of, this is really red primary to me. This is not an easy one to nail. Okay, so with that tannin, I think we could probably rule out Gamay. Gamay is a grape that, with that carbonic quality from a Beaujolais kind of Nouveau situation, we wouldn't have virtually any of the tannin. It would be really light. This fits the bill in terms of its appearance, fits the bill in terms of its aroma, but on the palate, that tannin and that acid, I think basically put out kind of the Beaujolais Nouveau. A basic Beaujolais or a Beaujolais Village production, probably not that kind of concentration with the density of the flavor and the aromas. We could be in a single cru or a village from Beaujolais, like Morgon, for example, with this particular wine, but I'm not sure that that's, the tannin here is more Italian, I think, than typically Beaujolais would be. Burgundy and Pinot Noir, we talked about that initially. A couple of people said, yeah, based on the nose, I would guess Pinot Noir. We could be in the northern part, something in the northern kind of Côte d'Or, the Côte de Nuit perhaps, and sort of a Bourgogne level kind of Pinot Noir that would have some structure and power to it. But I don't know. That's not kind of as much as what I'm thinking. I'm heading more toward Nebbiolo, and I think that's where Kathy's finding herself too. Rick's noting a phenomenal finish. Yeah, those tannins are really pleasant. They lift the wine as an acid does, and just kind of carry it for a while, don't they? We've done this enough times now that I'm kind of forgetting what the past wines were, and I'm starting to think, like, have we done a Nebbiolo already? And if we haven't, then there's absolutely in the running here. Robert's noting pretty sold on southern Italy, so the Aglianico as an option there, or maybe further south and head to Sicily. The tightness of these tannins, it puts me back more north, where you get the warmth, you get the ripeness, you get the higher alcohol of something like a Langhe Nebbiolo, for example, that would give you this tart character and some of the tannin profile for sure, and the acidity. Jan's just saying Sangiovese by the smell. And so if it's Sangiovese, let's work Sangiovese for a minute. We're talking about Tuscany typically, or are we talking about another place in the world? And really you're talking then about New World productions of Sangiovese, which are a little bit more one-off. Basically the iconic place in the world. When you say Sangiovese, you're thinking about Tuscany, and you're thinking about principally the region of Chianti, but you also have Sangiovese grown in Vino Nobile di Montepulciano, and you have it in Montalcino, Brunello di Montalcino. And Brunellos make tannic, powerful, really, really beautiful wines. I don't know that this is sort of, I think I would get a little bit darker cherry element, probably some of the more aromatic quality, and Brunello would probably not be in our price point, going back to what Chris had said in the past about a previous wine. So I think we put out Brunello, but we could definitely be talking about sort of Chianti in this particular wine. And I think that would be a fair call, absolutely. And Robert's noting strong tannins, no floral rose element, and no orange rim, so he's shying away from or Tanya's noting that, excuse me, thank you, Tanya. No, no floral note rose, right? You're not getting the rose element, no orange rim, and shying away from the Nebbiolo. The orange rim is a good indicator of Sangiovese typically too. I don't usually get it as much on the Nebbiolo, but I got a tiny faint bit of that, but maybe that's just because I'm looking for it. There's almost like between the watery meniscus and the core, there's sort of a tawny element that's potentially orange-ish, but not terribly. So that's holding your own then on Aglianico. Chris is saying Tuscan Sangiovese. Christina's looking forward to the reveal. Isabel's also noting that we consider Valpolicella, so going to the northeastern side of Italy, absolutely in the Veneto, and picking up that. I think, so Valpolicella has kind of a little bit more of a dimensional element to it. By that I mean there's usually multiple different varieties in a Valpolicella, the Corvina, the Molinara, the Rondinella. And usually you can have a dominant kind of Corvina wine with a few other splashes, and you get like an extra little dimension here. This seems like, to put it in a music analogy, more like a solo of one instrument rather than a trio playing together. So I'm a little bit more comfortable with sort of Sangiovese or with Nebbiolo personally. Jonathan's throwing out Canonau though, and it's from Sardinia. Barbera I think is an absolute option here too. Which would account for sort of that riper element, some of the red fruit, riper, higher alcohol, but then you'd get usually a little bit darker fruit, but this could be, a Barbera d'Asti, and would be beautiful for that reason, as a really quality-oriented that. Could be Dolcetto with all that tannin. every time I think about Nebbiolo and I taste Dolcetto, there's usually a ton of tannin there, usually a little bit darker fruit, so I might rule out Dolcetto in this case. Cannonau is an interesting idea. Cannonau I've tried would also be a little darker from recollection, but I haven't had a lot to know, so that would be a great call if you recognize that. Oh, Caitlin's throwing out there the Wavra Longue Nebbiolo 2017, which I think absolutely this could be a perfect call for this wine. I mean, I would be comfortable saying that too. Super Tuscan Merlot Sangiovese has some potential legs, but like I just said, Max, I don't know that it has sort of the dimension of multiple instruments pairing together here. And there's usually like a plushness to those wines that come from the Super Tuscan realm, just a little bit more voluptuousness in the mouth that is not here. This is a little bit racy. And Sean, you correctly point out that this is not an IPA. So we can rule that out too. Isabel's okay with the idea of the Vietti Nebbiolo. Yeah, that cherry's there. And I think sometimes you don't quite get the same rose element on sort of their basic entry Nebbiolo, which is a way to get us back into the Nebbiolo. So I'm pretty comfortable with Piedmont Nebbiolo. Anybody else want to put a definite pin in what they're guessing? What they're going to say is their final guess, final choice? As we do that, let's kind of resume what we did, right? So we looked at it, we said it was pale, it was ruby, it had potential high alcohol with the watery rim, it had a ton of red fruit character, a little bit of pepper, some bubblegum notes. As we tasted it, we kind of verified some of that red fruit, some of the confectionery quality in terms of like a strawberry Twizzler or strawberry licorice element. We got some more earthen element by way of some of the smoky quality. Tannin for days, acid, high. So, but it's still not a robust wine. It's sort of a medium-bodied wine with a longer finish. So we thought we're kind of in Italy. We ruled out most of where France could deliver this particular wine, unless we're kind of considering, again, the Malbec, carbonic Malbec from the southwestern part of France, which would be also a very cool esoteric call. Sangiovese and Nebbiolo seem to be dominating in the discussion. We have a little bit of potential from further south in the way of the Aglianico, or going up northeastern to the Veneto and Corvino blend, which kind of is neat. Yeah, we also have Barbera to consider. Thank you, Erica, you pointed that back out. Rosso Montepulciano from Marche, from Jeff, from Swanbergs. That's interesting. And then throwing out South African Pinotage, just to give us a pause and something to think about there. I get kind of a rubbery quality from Pinotage. I don't know. I'd be delighted if this was, because I haven't had a wine that's Pinotage that tastes like this, but I would be less comfortable kind of heading that way. Sometimes you get a burnt rubber element. The Senso and Pinot Cross, that is Pinotage. Senso can give you like this sinewy quality, this little meatiness and earthiness that sometimes is there. But it's Pinotage for me still is a learning experience as I continue to try them. There isn't a continuity to the experience that I've had of a dozen or so Pinotage that I've tried. So I'm not 100% on that. Yeah, Kathy, that's a good way to describe it, kind of asphalty. There's a petroleum, rubber, or asphalt quality to Pinotage sometimes. Montepulciano from Jonathan. Yeah, man, that's another option. I think that's a possibility here too. Klaus is asking about Eastern Europe, and he would know. That's a fair question. Would the alcohol be as high in Eastern European red-oriented fruit, and what would it be? So we're looking at what, like Lagrange or Blaufränkisch, or help me out here, what else am I missing, Klaus? What should I be considering? I don't think it's Austrian Pinot, for example. It's just the quality and the particular experience of the tannin that, for me, is taking me to Nebbiolo. It doesn't hit all of the points of Nebbiolo with respect to kind of that rose element, but yeah, I like the the Longue Nebbiolo kind of call earlier, I think that would be, that's kind of be where I'm going to head. How about you guys? Yeah, this is really nice. What would you guys, as you're kind of putting your final thoughts down, what would you pair with this? So that was a question just posed. Tannin, for one thing. So talking about taste and the tannin profile on a wine. So when you're trying to accentuate a particular taste, so if it's an acid or a sweetness, in this case tannin too, you can often match them with a matching taste. So for example, if you want to downplay a little bit of the tannin, it's going to need a little bit of rare meat and a tiny bit of fat, for example. So that tannin will dissipate if you don't want to have that tannic expression in your mouth. If you like that tannin element, stick away from something that has a little rareness or some fat to it. Melanie's pointing out that duck would go great with this. Yeah, and especially like a duck breast, for example, with a little bit of the skin that's rendered and you get some of the fat remaining there, and you cook the duck breast to say medium, this would be beautiful with that because the tannins are going to then soften as they bond to that meat. And then you could play with fruit components for the sauce for that duck. Cherry would be fantastic, right? So you can have sort of a cherry-based meat sauce. So cook the duck bones and make a duck jus, and then add a little bit of cherry or dried cherries to that. Add some fresh cherry to that too. Make an equal part of sort of that duck jus and cherry juice, and reduce that together, and then lacquer kind of the duck would be amazing with this. Rick's pointing out that this would go really well with our umami burger, and that's sort of a cheat because it's totally true. The umami burger kind of goes with everything. That umami just amplifies flavor. It's like plugging in whatever you're listening to an amplifier, and the sound just gets bigger. So whatever you drink with the umami burger works, including, Sean, the IPA. Prosciutto mushroom pizza from Caitlin. If you're making it, yeah, absolutely. Oh, that'd be fantastic. Yeah. Mushrooms done up in this part of the world where they might wrap prosciutto or wrap a speck ham or something around a porcini and then crust it with cornmeal and fry it, for example. That would be magnificent with this. But yeah, salty hams, things of that sort would be delicious. Chris is hungry again. I understand. I am too, man. Venison was just noted by Jonathan. Yeah, venison, like a game would be fun here, especially like venison where you have rich, profound flavor, but not necessarily something that's super fatty or rich. It would be cooked kind of, if you did a venison loin and you did it medium rare, you'd have that rareness that would bond with the tannin here, but it would allow sort of that delicate quality of both to go well here. Beef dough, nice, good call there. Yeah. Thanks, Max. Mushroom lasagna. Yeah, the strong tannins are something you might want to contend with in terms of your preparation. You can alter things. So if you typically like your meat cooked medium well, for example, I might consider trying it medium in this iteration to see what those tannins do with that, or medium to medium rare, for example. All right. Let's do our last kind of gut check. Just kind of close your eyes, taste it, internalize everything we've talked about, and then let yourself have the answer. Oh, thank you, Jean. That's so awesome. Jean notes that these mystery wines are making her want to come back and have dinner at Field, Maine, and we are looking forward to that day very much as you. Look forward to being back together, sharing wine, sharing food, and connecting with one another. Wild boar with cherry reduction from Klaus. Yes, sir. Thank you. Truffled mushroom risotto with ossobuco. Oh, all of those things. Yes. As I paused for a moment there and thought about it, I think I'm comfortable with a Longue Nebbiolo. And let's talk a little bit about vintage. So vintage, you'd probably get more from the visual than you do anything else from the visual side of things. And so if there was a tawny element, if it was particularly aged, there was a real variation from the rim to the edge, or to the core center, you'd be picking up on potential age. I'd say this is relatively youthful. The tannins also are an indicator of your idea of age. If they're really aggressive and powerful up front and they haven't softened, you're generally thinking about something that's a little bit more youthful. If you see sediment too in the wine, if it's dropping, if the tannin itself is bonding to the protein compounds in the wine and falling out in the form of sediment, you'd have an indication of age. And so I think this is a more youthful wine, let's say 2 to 4 years. So we could be talking about maybe a 2018, 2017, 2016 perhaps, but I think I might comfortably say 2017 Nebbiolo from Langhe, which is the broad classification region in the Piedmont in Italy. So I'll say 17 Langhe Nebbiolo. That's where I'm staying. How about you guys? Robert's noting they're going to stay with Tanya's too, I think, right? The Sangio Alianico. Man, this acid just makes you pucker, which is great. All right. So sometimes, a lot of times, Nebbiolo is in a Burgundy bottle with sort of a sloped side. This is in a Bordeaux bottle, which might mean that it's not Nebbiolo. Sometimes they might put a basic Nebbiolo in this bottle, but already sometimes you can cheat by looking at the bottle and figuring out what this wine might be just by the bottle shape. You learn a lot that way, but that's super cool. This is a wine from Sicily, from Calabretta, which is Vino Rosso, and this is 13% alcohol, so I thought it had a little bit more alcohol to it. The grape variety here is 100% Nerello Mescalese, which is cool. We considered it early on, and I walked a little bit away from it. But this is a super awesome wine. Great producer. They're doing really cool things. And Nerello is, for me, I kind of described Nerello kind of like a cross between Pinot Noir and Nebbiolo, which is what we're talking about, and yet didn't really drive back home the idea of a Nerello here. These are great wines. We have had a number of them here and love them. They go remarkably well with things that are cooked over fire and on the hearth. They give you texture and tannin and acidity. They age incredibly well. And this is, again,
So I couldn't find it.
where is the vintage on this little guy?
I can't see it on
Doesn't have one. So it's Italian. We made it in a year. Why is it important? Don't think about it. These wines are incredible values usually too, and even the top end production of these is nowhere near what a top end Nebbiolo from the Piedmont would be from a Barolo or a Barbaresco standpoint, or of great Burgundy, for example. So this is an area that focus in on a little bit if you're looking to collect some wines and you want a value that's going to return for you over time and give you things you can drink now. So it's awesome that way. And Caitlin, yeah, I love this producer too. They make some really fun wines. This is the Cala Cala bottling, and we have a wonderful wine we have some wines from Ariana Occhipinti from this particular part of the world. We have some wines from a really great collective cooperative called the Custodians of Mount Etna. Those wines are spectacular, made by Salvador Foti. Just beautiful stuff. So this is a neat one. I think, for me, as I keep learning more about this varietal, every time I talk about Nebbiolo, I should talk about, or at least think about, Nerello Mescalese, and I did that this evening and still didn't do it through to the completion. So anyway, that's how it goes. I enjoy doing it, and it's a joy to have this in the glass as much as it is a joy to talk with you about this wine and share our experience of going through it together. So Matthew's saying it's non-vintage. Yeah, according to the label, as far as I can see, unless I'm missing it. It says kind of Lotto CLR 15 on it, which maybe if I'm guessing, like that would be the lot from 2015. It's just a guess. But a lot of the wine that you see from Nerello Mescalese produced is aged longer, or at least we're seeing older vintages or older wine in the marketplace, and that's really cool. So yeah, Nicole, a fair point. The Mafia would like them to differentiate the difference between the Piedmont and Sicily. 100%. My grandfather was from the southern part of near Naples, essentially. But for my entire life, until I was 18, believed he was from northern Italy because people from Sicily from the south, not him. And so the perspective of north versus south was always an important part for him. And we went and visited when I was 18, where he grew up, this little village. And I'm like, we're outside of Naples. This is the south. And no, nonsense. This is the north. There are further south people living further south, so we're the north. But the distinction is important. So cheers, everybody. Thanks to all of you for playing along and for helping a lot. We got through this one in a beautiful way, even though we didn't get it right. We'll do it again next week as we do a white wine for the next week. And love how all of you are kind of figuring this game out and playing with a greater proficiency, but also as you're figuring it out, you're coming in and buying 4 weeks in advance, which is just tremendous. And for those of you that are interested in these wines, we always have now a few more available. I think we have about a case, maybe a case and a half of this available, and we can try to find some more if you're interested in more. So if you want some more to keep on hand for you, let us know. We'll put up some aside for you and have that available for your next visit out our way. One final note is that tomorrow we'll be launching some to-go entrees to accompany our sandwich offerings. So we'll have some soft-shell crabs on the menu that we'll be serving for takeout. We'll have a skirt steak tomorrow with some asparagus and smashed ringling potatoes that came from the farmer's market this week. We'll have our confit chicken thighs coming back, and they're going to be paired with sort of a coq au vin blanc preparation with spring onions and some Little Mountain mushrooms that just came to us yesterday. And we will have a little gumbo. Actually, a couple comments about the gumbo. We're going to do a little shrimp and andouille sausage. We made a little extra andouille to be able to run a shrimp variation on the gumbo for an option too. So we look forward to seeing all of you at the pickup and having some to-go meals with us this week as we prepare for next week's tasting. Cheers, everybody.